I saw him last night. He was there, and I couldn't breathe.
I know, I heard. It's all right.
Just take your time.
She was the kind of woman no one noticed. Big glasses, hair pulled back, lifeless clothes. For 2.5 years, Marlowe served coffee to the most powerful man in Chicago without ever getting more than a distracted glance. Until the night she stopped behind a door and heard her name. On the other side there was laughter, a bet, humiliation, and his voice in the middle of it all. Marlowe cried alone. But it was that night that something died inside her, and something else was born. Days later, she walked into the gala on the arm of Beckett Calloway's biggest rival. The entire ballroom went still, and for the first time, he looked. For the first time, his eyes lingered on her too long, as if he were trying to figure out who that woman was, as if it were already too late to forget her. And Marlowe realized, her heart racing against her will, that the most dangerous thing wasn't Beckett finally noticing her. It was the way she still shivered when he looked.
Hi, I'm Rowan. A special shout out to those of you watching Book 1 for free here on the My Stories platform, completely ad-free and uninterrupted.
Chapter 1. The Invisible Woman of the 57th Floor. The alarm clock rang for the third time, and Marlowe Adair opened her eyes with the absolute certainty that the day was already lost. 7:18. She had 12 minutes to cross Chicago and reach the 57th floor of the Calloway Tower before Beckett Calloway laid a hand on the doorknob of his office. She jumped out of bed, pulled the first blouse out of the closet, white, decent, and spilled her coffee cup down her chest before she'd even taken the first sip. The dark stain spread across the fabric like a taunt. She stared at the mirror for 3 seconds, breathed, and did the only thing left. She swapped it for the beige blouse. The beige one, the eternal one. The blouse that waited for her in the back of the closet for the mornings when the world laughed at her before 8. She pulled her hair into a tight bun, put on the thick-framed glasses that had no prescription whatsoever, and left the apartment without looking in the mirror again. It was safer. The subway was packed, as always. She wedged herself between a man in a rumpled suit and a teenage girl with earbuds in, and mentally ran through the day's schedule like a prayer. 9 o'clock meeting with the acquisitions board, lunch cancelled, 4 p.m., video conference with Geneva, 6, signing of the Montreal-Beaumont contract. If she were 5 minutes late, Beckett would know. If she were 10 minutes late, he wouldn't say a word, and that was worse. At 8:10, Marlowe crossed the lobby of the Calloway Tower with the gait of someone trying not to be noticed. The grey marble reflected the high ceiling, and the security guards nodded without really looking at her. The private elevator to the 57th floor rose in silence. She closed her eyes for 2 floors. It smelled like coffee and cedar, the scent of the tower. The anteroom was empty. Marlowe slid over to her desk, turned on the computer, opened his calendar, and was already drafting the briefing for the first meeting when she heard the sound she knew by heart, Beckett Calloway's footsteps in the hallway. Firm, steady, quick. Neutral mood, then. An average day. She had learned to predict his mood by the speed of his footsteps. Quick and short, irritated, slow and long, tired. Very slow. Dangerous. On those days, the conference room emptied before he walked in. Today the steps were quick and steady. A workable day. Beckett walked past her desk without turning his head. A minimal nod, 2 centimeters of movement at most, and the door to his office closed. Marlowe let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. 2.5 years like this. Every day. Marlowe, good morning. Have you eaten anything? She looked up and found Theron Blackwood standing beside her desk, a leather folder in one hand, a coffee cup in the other. Theron was chief counsel for the Calloway Group, Beckett's best friend since college, and the only man in his circle who greeted Marlowe by name. He wore a discreet navy blue suit, reading glasses pushed up to his forehead, and that expression of someone who had already gotten through 3 contracts before 8 in the morning. I have, yeah, Marlowe lied with a small smile. So you're a terrible liar for someone who works with these people, Theron replied, and dropped a granola bar onto her desk like it was nothing. The 9 o'clock became a 9:15. Sterling's running late, again. She noted the change in the calendar. Sterling Ashford was the kind of man who showed up late to meetings, because he knew no one would have the nerve to start without him. "Thanks, Theron." He gave a half nod with his coffee cup and disappeared down the hallway. Marlowe looked at the granola bar and thought, for the 1,000th time, that if every man on that floor were like Theron Blackwood, she probably wouldn't even need the beige blouses. The day passed like any other. The 9 o'clock became a 10. The video conference with Geneva had a signal issue, and Marlowe fixed it in 4 minutes. One call to IT, 2 instructions in French to the Geneva technician, and the call was back up before anyone in the Chicago room noticed the glitch. Beckett signed the Montreal contract without reading it. She had already reviewed it. He never knew. She never said. At 6:30, the floor began to empty out. By 7, only the emergency lights and the blue glow of the sleeping monitors remained. Marlowe was on her way to the elevator when she remembered the Montreal Beaumont contract, the physical copy signed, that needed to be brought to the legal department Monday morning. She hadn't picked it up. She walked back down the hallway, the sound of her own low heels echoing on the marble floor. Friday night empty office, the kind of silence that made every step sound louder than it was. She passed the kitchenette, the main conference room, and turned down the hallway that led to Beckett's office. The door was ajar, light on, voices. Marlowe stopped before she'd even decided to stop. Her body halted on its own, as if it knew something her head hadn't yet caught up to. 50,000. The voice was Sterling Ashford's, drawling, amused, full of that certainty of a man who had never heard the word no. 50 grand says not even an expensive dress can save her. Take the assistant, Beckett. Take Marlowe to the gala and bet me. Marlowe felt the blood drain down to her feet. Sterling Ashford was heir to the Ashford family, Beckett's friend since boarding school, and the kind of man who treated the world like a joke only he was in on. Next to him always, Gideon Marsh, who laughed after Sterling laughed as if he needed the sound to know something was funny. Gideon's voice came next, muffled. She's cute in a sad kind of way, the kind that only comes to life with 3 hours of professional makeup. There was a pause, something being poured into a glass. Ice. Imagine, Sterling went on, lowering his tone like a man about to tell the best part. Imagine the poor thing's face when she finds out it was a joke, that you only took her to see if we could make a woman like that look human for one night. Gideon laughed, a short, mocking laugh, and then Sterling started mimicking the way she walked. Marlowe didn't need to see it. She could hear the shuffling of shoes on the office carpet, the little hunched step, the sound of someone pretending to be her. Bet or no bet, Beckett? The silence in the room lasted the length of a breath. Marlowe clutched the folder to her chest, her nails digging into the leather, and prayed he would say something. Anything. A get out of my office, Sterling. A knock it off. A don't talk about her like that. What came was a laugh, short, dry. The laugh of a man who neither disagreed nor agreed, who simply let it slide because disagreeing would be too much trouble. Beckett Calloway's laugh. Marlowe stood there for a full second, the hallway slowly spinning around her. The Montreal Beaumont contract forgotten, the folder against her chest, her own feet which wouldn't move. She thought, without being able to stop the thought, that she had spent 2.5 years choosing not to be seen by a man who, after all, had never really seen her at all. She took a step back, then another and another. She turned down the hallway without making a sound, because noise was the last thing she wanted to make right now, and she walked to the women's restroom on the 57th floor as if she were walking underwater. She locked the door, pressed her back against the cold tile, looked at the big mirror above the marble counter. The woman in the mirror had a bun pulled too tight, glasses that served no purpose, a beige blouse with a coffee stain she had managed to hide all day. Her eyes, red, were starting to fill, and her mouth was clenched so hard she could see her jaw locked through the skin. Marlowe looked at that woman. The woman looked back, and for the first time in 3 years, she didn't recognize anyone in the reflection. Chapter 2, The Woman in the Green Dress. Marlowe timed it. 12 minutes exactly, crying against the bathroom door, her eyes on the clock because if she stopped watching it, the crying would turn into something else, something bigger, something she wouldn't be able to fold back up afterward. At 12 minutes, she turned on the faucet, splashed her face with cold water, took 3 breaths, and walked out. She took the service stairs. 57 flights of concrete and yellow light, her heels echoing in a steady rhythm that kept her tied to her body. In the lobby, the night security guard nodded like always. She didn't nod back. She pretended to be busy on her phone. On the sidewalk, she caught the first cab that pulled over. "Pilsen," she told the driver. "I'll show you the street later." Chicago streamed past the window in smeared lights. Marlowe pressed the folder to her chest and counted the blocks. Counting was better than thinking. 36 blocks until home. 36 chances to pretend nothing had happened. At home, she slipped off her shoes by the door, dropped the folder on the floor, walked to the bedroom without turning on the light. She lay down in bed fully dressed. The ceiling was white. The ceiling had been white for the 3 years she had shared that apartment with a man whose name she preferred not to say out loud, and it stayed white after he left. White is the ceiling color of someone who doesn't change anything, because changing means admitting that something happened. She looked at her phone. 12:04. She called Ren. "Marlowe, if this is about that dress I promised to fix for your cousin's wedding, I swear on everything." Ren Delacroix's voice came from the other end, muffled with chewing in the background. "I already started. Don't stress me out in the middle of my pasta." Ren was an up-and-coming designer, owner of Atelier Sévigné in Wicker Park. Sharp-tongued, red on her lips at any hour of the day or night, and the best friend Marlowe had had since her freshman year of college. She always answered the phone, even with her mouth full, even at 4 in the morning. "Ren." Something about the way Marlowe said the name made the chewing stop. "What happened?" "He laughed." Silence on the other end. "Who laughed, Marlowe?" "Beckett." Her voice came out lower than she meant it to. "Sterling made a bet, 50 grand, saying I'd show up to the gala thinking he liked me, that not even an expensive dress could save me. He even did an impression of the way I walk, and Beckett laughed." Ren didn't answer right away. Marlowe heard the clink of a fork being set down on a plate, a chair scraping back, footsteps. Ren pacing her own kitchen, processing, sharpening her voice. "Are you home?" "Yeah." "Did you cry?" 12 minutes. "Contained. Good." Ren took a deep breath. "You're going to the gala, Marlowe." "Ren, I'm not even going to think about—" "You're going to the gala, but not with him." Marlowe stayed quiet, the white ceiling spinning slowly above her. "Tomorrow at 10 I'm coming over," Ren went on, her voice now at the frequency Marlowe knew, the frequency of executing a plan. "Throw on whatever, don't worry about it. We'll figure everything out at the studio and Marlowe." "What?" "They are never going to laugh at you again, I swear to you." Marlowe hung up. She stared at the ceiling a little longer, and for the first time that night her mouth didn't tremble. Saturday morning, 10 on the dot. The doorbell rang. Ren walked in carrying 2 coffee bags, a red leather purse slung over her shoulder, and that air of a woman who had already made 3 decisions before opening the door. She looked Marlowe up and down, rumpled pajamas, hair in a crooked bun, puffy eyes. "Perfect," Ren said. "Easier to rebuild from here." "You talk like I'm a building." "You are a building, honey. A building with a facade problem." Atelier Sévigné was on the 2nd floor of a brick walk-up in Wicker Park, with white walls, floor-to-ceiling mirrors, and a center rack full of fabrics in shades of ivory, moss green, and black. Ren unlocked the door, turned on the lights, pointed to the velvet bench in the middle of the studio. "Sit. Take off the glasses." Marlowe took them off. Ren grabbed the glasses, turned them in her hand, and tossed them into a decorative trash can next to the mannequin. The glasses made a tiny clink against the metal bottom. "These were a disguise, and you knew it the day you bought them," Ren said, pulling the pins out of Marlowe's bun one by one. "I let you wear them because you needed to. You don't need to anymore." Marlowe's hair fell down her shoulders, dark brown, wavy, long down to the middle of her back. Ren stopped behind her and looked at the reflection in the mirror for longer than usual. "Marlowe Adair," she said low, "you spent 2.5 years playing the invisible woman for a man who, apparently, didn't even deserve your good morning. Now you're going to remind the city of Chicago who you are." Marlowe looked at her own reflection. The woman in the mirror was different from the one she'd seen in the 57th floor bathroom the night before. Not exactly beautiful, not exactly imposing, just visible. And visible was already something. Ren went over to the studio closet, opened the doors, and pulled a moss-green dress off the hanger. Heavy fabric, long drape, a back neckline that ran down to the base of the spine. She held the dress up in front of Marlowe. "Try it on." "Ren, I can't wear this." "You can, and you will." While Marlowe changed, Ren went to the dresser where Marlowe had left her bag and started pulling out one by one the beige blouses stuffed inside. Marlowe had driven over straight from work, her backpack still full of clothes from a short trip. Ren held up the first beige blouse in front of her face, examined it with solemnity, and dropped it into the studio trash bin. "This one owes you 2 years of your life. Goodbye." She picked up the second one. "This one made you look like a burnt-out lamp in an antiques museum. Goodbye." She picked up the third. "This one I'm not even going to comment on. Goodbye." Marlowe stepped out of the fitting room with the moss-green dress on and laughed, her first laugh in 14 hours. Ren dropped the fourth blouse in the trash without looking and turned her head. Stopped. "Girl," Ren said, her voice dropping an octave, "I'm going to make this man cry in the middle of that ballroom. I don't want him to cry. I know I do." In the afternoon, still Saturday, Ren took her to a low-key vernissage at Holloway Gallery in River North, a social rehearsal. Marlowe needed to walk in the new dress, talk to strangers, practice the posture of someone who doesn't spend her life trying to take up less space. She wore a simpler black dress for the gallery. The green was for the gala. It was between a glass of champagne and a black and white photography piece that a man stopped beside her. Tall, dark blonde hair, cut short, graphite grey suit with no tie. He looked at the piece for a few seconds before speaking. "I know you." Marlowe turned. She knew him too. Calder Vaughan, CEO of Vaughan Mercer Holdings, the Callaway Group's biggest direct rival. She had seen him 3 times in negotiation meetings, always on the other side of the table, always silent, watching Beckett. He had the clear eyes of a man who sizes things up before speaking, and the calm voice of a man who had never needed to raise his tone to be heard. "Marlowe Adair," she answered, "Beckett Callaway's executive assistant. I know who you are." He smiled, the small smile of someone who is surprised and trying to hide it. "I just had to look twice." She couldn't tell whether that was a compliment or an observation. Calder went on, "Are you going to the Callaway Gala tomorrow?" "I am." "With someone?" Marlowe hesitated. She thought of Ren sitting on a stool nearby, pretending to analyze a sculpture. She thought of the laughter behind the door. Alone. Calder tilted his head. His whiskey glass paused halfway to his mouth. "I'll be there." "Professionally speaking, I'd rather not show up alone either." A pause. "If you'd like to walk in on my arm, I'd be honored." Marlowe looked at him for a beat that felt longer than it was. It wasn't attraction. It was strategy, on both sides. And for the first time in 3 years, she was on the side of strategy. "I accept." He handed her his card with an elegant motion. Marlowe tucked it into her clutch and went to find Ren, who was already on her way over, eyes wide and mouth slowly opening into a grin. "Tell me it was who I think it was." "It was Marlowe Adair." Ren grabbed her arm hard enough to almost knock the glass out of her hand. "You just agreed to walk into Beckett Callaway's gala on the arm of the man he hates most in Chicago." "I know. I love you." Sunday night. The Beaumont Hotel, main ballroom, the pride of the Callaway chain. Crystal chandeliers, gilded columns, a string quartet in the left corner. Beckett Callaway arrived at 7:30 on the dot, impeccable black tuxedo, and positioned himself near the entrance to greet the important guests. Theron beside him, whiskey glass in hand, staring at nothing. Sterling Ashford and Gideon Marsh were already there, near the bar, laughing too loud for men who hadn't had enough to drink yet. Sterling shot Beckett a knowing look from across the room. Beckett pretended not to see it. "You sure about what you did?" Theron asked, voice low, without looking sideways. "It's just a joke, Theron." "It isn't." Beckett turned his head to face his friend. Theron kept looking at the entrance, the whiskey untouched in his hand, his jaw slightly tight. "You know it isn't," Theron added. "You're just pretending it is because it's easier that way." Before Beckett could answer, the quartet switched songs, and heads in the ballroom began to turn toward the double doors. Something had happened there. Marlowe walked in on Calder Vaughan's arm. Moss green dress, hair loose, the back neckline running down the full length of her spine to the waist. No glasses, no bun. The posture of a woman who had just figured out that same week that taking up space was a right and not an offense. The ballroom went into that kind of silence ballrooms go into when someone walks in a way no one was expecting. A waiter passed near the central column carrying a tilted tray. A champagne flute slid 2 centimeters before he corrected the balance. No one noticed the waiter. They were all looking at Marlowe. Sterling Ashford choked on his champagne. Gideon Marsh slapped him on the back twice. Beckett Calloway looked at the entrance, and for 3 full seconds, his brain didn't process what his eyes were seeing. The woman in the green dress was Marlowe, his assistant. The woman with the thick glasses nobody looked at twice. The same one who had walked out of his office on Friday night with a folder pressed to her chest, not meeting his eyes, 2 days ago. Theron, standing beside him, took his first sip of whiskey of the night, glanced briefly at Beckett, at Marlowe, back at Beckett, said low, barely moving his lips, "Ah, so that's the bet." Beckett didn't answer. He couldn't. Marlowe crossed the ballroom on Calder's arm, stopped to greet 2 French executives in fluent French, and Beckett, from across the room, blinked twice before accepting that it was her speaking. In 2.5 years, he had never heard her voice in another language. It was like seeing a room in his own house he had never stepped into. Calder guided her with a hand at her waist, 3 fingers of distance, respectful. She laughed, a loose, real laugh, her head tilted slightly back. Beckett heard that laugh from across the ballroom and felt the glass turn heavy in his hand, as if someone had filled the crystal with lead. In 2.5 years, he had never heard Marlowe Adair laugh like that. In 2.5 years, he had never once wondered whether she laughed. He started moving toward the dance floor before he had decided to move. "Beckett!" Theron grabbed him by the elbow, no force to it, just a warning. "Breathe. Not here." Beckett stopped, breathed, waited for the waltz to end. When Marlowe broke away from Calder to go get a glass of water, he approached, crossing the ballroom slowly, as if walking fast would be admitting something. She saw him coming, held his gaze, didn't blink. "Marlowe." His voice came out a tone lower than he'd meant. "You look—" "I look what, Mr. Calloway?" The Mr. Calloway hit him like a punch to the sternum. She never called him that when they were alone. She had been calling him Beckett for 1.5 years. Mr. Calloway was what she used in meetings, around strangers, around anyone who didn't need to know about the working intimacy the 2 of them had built. It was her way of saying, "You've lost the right." "I need to talk to you," he said. "Your calendar is full tomorrow. Your first meeting is at 9 with the acquisitions board. Good night, Mr. Calloway." Marlowe took the glass of water off the tray, turned, and walked back to Calder Vaughan without looking over her shoulder. Beckett stood there in the middle of the ballroom, holding a champagne glass he had forgotten to drink. Later, when Marlowe stepped out onto the hotel terrace, just for a minute because the air in the ballroom was too heavy, Beckett followed her. The terrace was large, empty at that hour, the Chicago skyline scored by the lights of the Loop in the distance. She was leaning against the railing, the green dress moving lightly in the wind. "Marlowe." She didn't turn. "I know you heard me," he said. His voice was different now, smaller. "Friday night, behind the door. I know." She tightened her grip on the railing, and the delicate ring on her right ring finger glinted in the reflection of the lights. She didn't speak. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything," Marlowe answered, still without turning. "Good night, Mr. Calloway." She walked back into the ballroom. Beckett stayed on the terrace longer than he'd meant to. By the time he finally went back inside, Marlowe had already left. Calder Vaughan raised his glass to him from across the ballroom. A polite gesture, the gesture of a rival who had just won the night without a fight. Beckett went home before midnight. He took off the tuxedo, lay down in bed without turning off the light. The ceiling of his bedroom was also white. He stared at the ceiling for a while and discovered, at 34 years old, what it felt like to have something move inside his chest without being able to control it. It wasn't anger. Anger, he knew. It was fear. Fear that it was already too late. Chapter 3. The Man Who Chooses in Public. Monday morning. Marlowe crossed the lobby of the Callaway Tower at 9 on the dot, not at 8:10 like she had for the past 2.5 years. She was late on purpose and she was different. Straight-leg black pants, a navy blazer tailored to her body, a white silk blouse, hair loose, falling over her shoulders. No bun, no glasses. On her feet, low heels that made a firm sound on the lobby marble. The security guards looked twice before nodding. One of them let out a "Good morning, Miss Adair," with a slight confusion in his voice, as if he was speaking to someone who looked like Marlowe, and not Marlowe herself. She rode the private elevator up in silence, the white envelope pressed against her folder. She hadn't rehearsed a single line. She didn't need to. What she was about to do was short. The 57th floor anteroom was lit. Beckett was already in his office with the door open. Monday habit, acquisitions board meeting at 9. He lifted his eyes from the computer the moment he heard her footsteps in the hallway. He stopped breathing for a second when he saw her cross the doorway. Marlowe walked into the office without asking permission. She placed the white envelope on the mahogany desk, exactly in the center, aligned with the edge, and stepped back twice. Letter of resignation. 2 weeks' notice, all formalized. Beckett looked at the envelope. He didn't pick it up. Marlowe, listen to me. I listened, Mr. Callaway. Friday night, behind that door. He closed his eyes for 2 seconds, a small movement, almost imperceptible. Marlowe recognized it. It was what he did in difficult meetings, when he needed to think before answering. Except this time there was nothing to answer. I didn't, he began. You laughed. Silence. Beckett opened his eyes. He didn't deny it. I'll serve out the notice period because I'm a professional, she went on, voice calm, the same calm with which she had delivered difficult messages for 2.5 years. I'll do the handover to the new assistant. I'll leave everything in order. After that, I disappear from your life and the company owes me nothing more than my salary. Marlowe. Is there anything on the calendar that needs to be changed, Mr. Callaway? The 9 o'clock with the board. Stop it. His voice came out harsher than he'd meant. He corrected himself on the next note, lower. Please, stop calling me that. She looked at him for a long moment and said slowly, That's your name to me now. Marlowe walked out of the office. She didn't slam the door, she left it ajar, the way the door had been on Friday night. Beckett understood the gesture without having to think about it. He stared at the white envelope on the desk for almost 10 minutes before calling Theron. Tuesday afternoon, 3:30. Beckett asked Theron to set up a meeting in his office with Sterling Ashford and Gideon Marsh, no agenda described. He didn't want to ask Marlowe, who was still serving her notice out in the anteroom. The two arrived together, Sterling in front with that smile of a man who had never imagined a meeting could be a punishment. Beckett, Sterling said, settling onto the sofa without waiting for an invitation. What a grim mood. You need to get out more. Beckett was standing behind the desk. He didn't sit. He didn't offer a drink. He let them wait for a full minute before speaking. Step down from the Callaway Group board. Gideon Marsh looked at Sterling. Sterling looked at Beckett. What do you mean? Step down from the board. Step out of my events. Step out of my circle. Don't call me. Beckett's voice didn't rise a single note. The formal paperwork will be delivered by end of day. Sterling laughed. The laugh didn't last long because Beckett didn't smile back. Beckett, you're serious? Over a joke with the assistant? Sterling rearranged himself on the sofa, elbows on his knees. You laughed too, I remember. You were right there with me, on the same side. I laughed. Beckett paused. For the first time in the conversation, he stepped away from the desk, walked to the window, looked down at Chicago for a second. Then he turned back around. I laughed, and I'm going to pay for it the rest of my life. You won't. Sterling opened his mouth, but what came out was a small nervous laugh because Sterling only knew how to laugh when he was cornered. It was his way of pretending he still had control of the room. You're cutting off 20 years of friendship over an assistant. Beckett looked at Sterling without blinking. She has a name. You know her name. Sterling didn't answer. For the last time, Beckett said, going back to the desk, Marlowe Adair, memorize it. Because from here on, in any conversation in Chicago where that name comes up, you're going to be remembered as the man who tried to humiliate her and lost everything for it. Gideon stood up first, pulled Sterling by the shoulder. They walked out in silence. The door closed. Beckett stayed standing beside the desk, his hand gripping the back of the chair hard. The leather creaked. Theron came in 5 minutes later, without knocking. He brought a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses, poured both, handed one to Beckett, and sat down on the sofa where Sterling had been. "You did what needed doing," Theron said. "Late, but you did it." Beckett didn't answer. He took a sip of the whiskey. Then, without looking at Theron, he said quietly, "I only laughed, Theron. Sterling was the one who made the bet. Sterling was the one who did the impression of her walking. I only laughed." "You only laughed?" "I wasn't under any obligation to defend a woman I barely knew that week." Theron turned the glass in his hand, slowly. "Did you hear what you just said?" Beckett stayed silent. "A woman I barely knew. She worked by your side for 2.5 years, Beckett. She knew your calendar password, your mood by the speed of your footsteps, your father's name, and you just called her a woman you barely knew." Theron set the glass down. "That's exactly what she heard behind that door, not the laugh. The laugh was the symptom. What she heard was that you had never cared enough to notice she existed." Beckett opened his mouth, closed it. "I'm not correcting you out of morality," Theron continued. "I'm correcting you because I've known you for 20 years, and I know you're still trying to convince yourself you were less guilty than you were. That attempt, if you don't stop it now, is going to contaminate everything you do starting tomorrow." Beckett looked at his friend, then at the glass, then at Marlowe's envelope. "She resigned." "I know. She gave me a copy this morning." Beckett turned his face to his friend. "Why?" "Because she's professional. She wanted legal to already know." Theron turned the glass in his hand. "What are you going to do now, Beckett?" "What I should have done 2 years ago." "Which is?" Beckett thought for a moment. Then he said, "Look at her." Theron nodded, drank the whiskey in a single swallow and stood up. "Wednesday night there's an event at the Skylark Club. Year-end for the hotel industry. The whole city's elite will be there. The Callaway Group has a booth, a presentation, everything scheduled." Theron paused at the door. "Marlowe's going too." Beckett lifted his head. "She is?" "Professional commitment, her last week." Theron took hold of the doorknob. "I'm only telling you because if you're going to do something, do it in public. She deserves that much. In private, any apology turns into a private apology. In public, you own the bill." Theron walked out. Beckett stood there with the empty glass in his hand, staring at the white envelope. Wednesday night, 9 o'clock. Skylark Club, rooftop terrace of the Lakeshore building, view of Lake Michigan, laid over by the lights of the city. The space was packed, more than 300 people from Chicago's hotel elite, champagne flutes in every hand, a discreet DJ spinning smooth jazz in the corner. In the center, a small stage with a microphone for the year's closing speeches. Marlowe arrived with Wren on her arm, a simple black dress, straight cut just below the knee, no accessories, hair loose. Her posture was that of a woman who hadn't come there to ask for anything, not an apology, not forgiveness, not attention. She was just fulfilling the last commitment before disappearing. Across the terrace, Sterling Ashford was already trying to repair the damage. He worked the groups, glass in hand, spreading his version of the story in a low, confidential tone. "Marlowe set the whole thing up with Calder, you know. Beckett's furious with her, not with me." The executives nodded out of politeness and traded looks of people who had already heard a different version somewhere else in the room. Wren squeezed Marlowe's arm when she spotted Sterling from a distance. "That rat." "Ignore him." "I'll ignore him. But I'm going to stare at him with contempt all night, because contempt isn't a crime." Marlowe held back a laugh. She accepted a champagne flute from a waiter, didn't drink, and positioned herself near the central column of the terrace, a strategic spot for leaving quickly when the time came. That was when Beckett Callaway stepped onto the stage. The DJ lowered the music out of reflex. The microphone hissed for a second. The conversations wilted gradually, as always happened when Beckett stepped onto any stage at any event in Chicago. He was the man everyone expected to hear talk about numbers. Except this time, he didn't look at the teleprompter. There was no teleprompter. He looked at the audience, found Marlowe with his eyes in less than 3 seconds, and started speaking while looking at her. "Good evening. I was going to talk about annual results, portfolio growth, forecasts for 2026. He paused. "I'm not going to talk about that." The terrace went fully silent. Last week, 3 men in a closed room made a bet, $50,000. The subject of the bet was a woman, the most competent woman who has ever worked with me. The woman who for 2.5 years managed my calendar, solved my crises, signed my emails in 3 languages, and was never treated by me the way she deserved to be treated. Someone let a glass clink against another. Other than that, nothing. The bet was to humiliate her. It was cruel. It was stupid. Beckett breathed, and I, with my signature, with my laugh, with my silence, let that bet happen. I wasn't the man who proposed it, but I was the man who didn't say no. And today I understand that was worse. Sterling Ashford was leaning against a side table. His glass stopped in midair. "2 things in public," Beckett continued. "First, Sterling Ashford and Gideon Marsh, as of tonight, have no further connection to the Callaway Group. No board, no contracts, no invitations to events. It's on the record. It runs in the press tomorrow." A murmur rose across the terrace. Sterling opened his mouth, closed it. "Second," Beckett's voice firmed up, "Marlowe Adair is by a wide margin the most decent professional who has ever passed through the Callaway Group, and any rumor circulating in this room tonight that says otherwise will be handled by me personally. I know where the rumors come from. You do too, so choose carefully what you repeat." Beckett stopped. The entire room waited for a third sentence. He found Marlowe with his eyes from across the terrace for 2 seconds and chose not to say what he wanted to say. "That's all. Good night." He stepped down from the stage. No one applauded. No one knew what to do with what they had just heard. The DJ, lost, took longer than he should have to bring the smooth jazz back into the room. Marlowe stayed by the column. Wren, beside her, murmured, "Girl, he just burned 2 careers live on air for you." "I saw. Are you going to talk to him?" Marlowe looked at Beckett. He was on the opposite side of the terrace talking with Theron. He hadn't come toward her. He was waiting. "Not now." "Good girl." Marlowe took a sip of champagne for the first time, handed the flute to Wren, and walked toward the exit. Beckett saw her leave. He said something to Theron, set down his glass, and followed her. On the sidewalk in front of the Skylark Club, the October wind was blowing hard. The doorman whistled for a cab. Wren hung back 2 steps, looking at her phone with an unconvincing attempt at discretion. "Marlowe." She turned. Beckett had stopped about 2 meters away, respecting the space, not crowding. "You did what you had to do," she said, voice calm. "Thank you." "Marlowe, we'll talk. Not tonight." He stopped, nodded his head slowly, like a man accepting a sentence. "Whenever you want. Whenever I want." The cab pulled up. Wren opened the door. Marlowe got in, arranged the black dress over her legs, and looked at Beckett one last time through the glass. She didn't smile. She didn't nod. She just looked. The look of a woman who hasn't decided anything yet. The cab pulled away. Beckett stood on the sidewalk, his coat open, the wind slipping down the collar of his shirt, and for the first time in his life understood something simple and terrible. There was something in the world he couldn't buy, couldn't negotiate, couldn't order. Only earn. Theron came up behind him without speaking, put his hand on Beckett's shoulder for 2 seconds, then took it away. "Let's go home, Beckett." "Let's." They walked to the car in silence. Up above, the lights of the Skylark Terrace were still flickering, and somebody inside was asking the DJ to turn the music up. Chapter 4. The Patience of a Man Who Had Never Had to Have Any Friday Morning. Marlowe woke up early, decided not to think about anything before lunch, and made it through the work week like someone crossing a bridge that still stretches twice as long ahead. Beckett didn't call her into his office once. He appeared in the hallway only at the scheduled times, signed the documents she left on the desk, and exchanged a single good morning with her in the elevator. Short, no weight, no pressure. She thanked him silently for the space he was giving her. At 12:30, Marlowe left the Callaway Tower to have lunch at Café Milchand, a small place 2 blocks from the tower, dark wood doors, the smell of warm bread and freshly roasted coffee. It was her corner. She had been going there 3 times a week for almost 2 years. No one from the 57th floor went to the Milchand. It was too small, too discreet, too ordinary. She pushed the wooden door. The bell tinkled softly above her head. And Beckett Calloway was sitting at the back table, grey blazer, white shirt, no tie, an untouched cup of coffee in front of him. Marlowe stopped on the entrance mat. The waiter behind the counter looked at her with a slightly uncomfortable expression, like a man who knew something out of the ordinary was happening. Beckett lifted his eyes. He didn't smile. He just pointed to the chair opposite him with the smallest nod of his head. "I can leave if you want me to," he said, voice low, calibrated not to carry to the next table. "I'm only asking you to choose, whether I stay or I go. I respect either." Marlowe stood still for 3 counted seconds. She thought about leaving. The door was right there behind her. She thought about the resignation envelope, the 2 weeks still to go, the conversation she had promised, and she realized that leaving now was only postponing something she would eventually have to face. She crossed the room, pulled the chair, sat down. "Did you follow me?" she asked. "No, Theron told me you came here on Fridays." "Theron shouldn't have told you." "I asked." She set the clutch on the table. The waiter showed up, shy, bringing the menu. Marlowe ordered the pesto chicken sandwich she always ordered, and a sparkling water. Beckett ordered another coffee. The waiter moved away quickly, as if relieved to be leaving. "I'm not going to stay long," she said, putting the napkin on her lap. "I have to get back to the tower, 3 p.m., meeting with Geneva." "I moved Geneva to 4. Marlowe looked at him. "You rescheduled my calendar?" "I rescheduled my calendar. I needed us to have the time of a full lunch." He paused. "If you want to leave earlier, you leave. But the ceiling is 3 p.m. for me too." She didn't answer. She just took the water the waiter had brought and drank a sip. Beckett waited. She noticed, against her will, that he was waiting in a way he never waited for anyone, in silence, without checking his phone, without looking at his watch. Beckett Calloway was a man who made other people wait. Watching him wait was strange. "Ask," he said. "Ask what?" "Whatever you want. I'll answer with the truth. I don't have any cleaned-up version." Marlowe set down the glass. "Why did you laugh?" Beckett took a deep breath. "Because it was easier. Sterling and Gideon have been walking into my office with jokes since boarding school. I learned to let it go. I let that one go too. And in that moment I wasn't thinking about you. I was thinking about ending the conversation fast so I could get back to work." He held the coffee cup without lifting it. "That's the honest part. The worst part is that if you hadn't heard it, I probably would have forgotten the joke by Friday. Did you think of me as a woman?" "No." She nodded slowly. It was an answer that hurt, but one she respected for being direct. "Why not?" "Because I didn't look at you." His voice dropped. "It wasn't out of disrespect, it was laziness. I had an assistant who solved everything, and I didn't need to know more than that. Today I understand the size of that laziness. Yesterday I didn't. And now you think. Now I can't stop thinking." Marlowe turned her face to the window for a second. The October sun hit the glass, yellow, low. She breathed. "Why are you here, Beckett?" He registered the use of his first name. He didn't comment. He didn't react. He just said, "Because I want to know you from the beginning the right way this time." She took a while to answer. The sandwich arrived. She ate half of it in silence. Beckett ate his own, a salad that wasn't even on the menu, ordered last minute so he wouldn't be sitting still while she ate, also in silence. When she finished, she wiped her mouth on the napkin and looked at him. "I have to think. Think. I haven't decided anything yet. You don't need to decide today." Beckett looked at her. "Marlowe, I'll wait for you as long as it takes. No drama, no pressure. If you tell me tomorrow that you want me to disappear, I disappear. But until you say that, I'm going to try." Marlowe picked up the clutch, stood up, left the bill on the table. She insisted on paying for her own lunch, and Beckett didn't argue. "Until Monday, Mr. Calloway." She smiled only with the corner of her lips when she said it. He registered the smile. He didn't smile back. The moment wasn't his. He just gave a short nod as she walked out. Sunday morning, 11 o'clock. The sun was mild, unusual for a Sunday in October in Chicago, and the air had that specific smell of fallen leaves and hot bakery coffee. Marlo was in the kitchen, still in her pajamas, when her phone buzzed with a message. "Beckett, I'm on the sidewalk outside your building. If you want to go to Foxglove Books with me, I'll wait 10 minutes. If not, I go home. No drama." She read the message 3 times. She went to the living room window, pulled the curtain aside. Beckett was leaning against a black car parked across the street, in jeans and a grey sweatshirt, clothes she had never seen him wear in 2.5 years. He wasn't looking at her window. He had his phone in his hand, typing something. 10 minutes. Marlo looked at the ceiling, then at her phone, then at the bedroom closet. She was downstairs in 8. She pushed open the front door of the building. She was wearing jeans, a simple white shirt, and a beige knit cardigan that Wren hadn't managed to find and throw out. Beckett lifted his eyes from his phone when he heard her approach. His smile was small, but it was there, the first real smile of Beckett Calloway's she had seen in 2.5 years. "Hi." "Hi." "Foxglove Books is 6 blocks away. Walk or drive?" "Walk." They started walking down the sidewalk. The first few meters in silence, a silence she expected to feel uncomfortable and which, to her surprise, didn't. Beckett didn't try to fill the air. He walked beside her with his hands shoved into the pockets of the sweatshirt, looking straight ahead, waiting for her to set the tone. "Why Foxglove?" she asked after 2 blocks. "Because I know you like it there. You ordered an edition of a mystery novel through the tower 6 months ago, and the receipt came from Foxglove. I kept it." She looked at him sideways. "You kept a receipt of mine?" "I kept several. Not for the reasons you might be thinking. It was a reimbursement folder. You never filed for reimbursement on those, but I kept the receipts in case you needed them." He paused. "When I realized this week that I didn't know anything about you, I opened the folder and read all of it," Marlo breathed. "And what did you find out?" "That you read more books than the Calloway Group's editorial department, that you buy coffee at the Milchan 3 times a week, that you have a subscription to a French newspaper that comes to you in the mail." He looked at her. "I wish I had learned that by talking to you, not by reading receipts." She didn't answer, but she walked a little closer to him. At the bookstore, Marlo got lost in the mystery aisles. Beckett didn't follow her. He stayed in the economic history section, flipping through books without buying any. Every 10 minutes, she looked over the shelf and found him there, patient. At some point, she picked up a French-language edition of a Fred Vargas novel, took it to the counter, and paid without calling him over. When they walked out, Beckett looked at the bag. "Is that in French?" "Yes." "You speak French fluently?" "I do." "Why did you never say?" Marlo stopped on the sidewalk, looked at him. "Because you never asked." He swallowed, nodded once. "Fair." They walked to Millennium Park. The cloud gate, the silver bean-shaped sculpture, reflected the blue sky and the gold autumn trees. Tourists were taking photos. Marlo stopped in front of the sculpture and looked at her own reflection, hair loose, no glasses, her whole body visible. For the first time, she didn't want to hide. Beckett stopped beside her. He didn't say anything. He just looked at the reflection of the 2 of them together in the curved metal. The reflection distorted by the curvature, 2 bodies close, not touching. "I studied in Paris," she said without turning her face. "1 semester at the Sorbonne. Exchange, junior year." "I didn't know." "Nobody from work did. I liked that they didn't." "Why?" Marlo took a while to answer. "Because when people know a lot about you, they think they can use it." Beckett registered the sentence, filed it away like a document. He didn't answer right away. "Tell me something about Paris," she laughed, a low laugh, short, caught off guard by the question. "Like what?" "Anything. What you ate. Where you lived. A scene." Marlo breathed. She told him about the bakery on the Rue de Seine that sold warm croissants starting at 6 in the morning, about the apartment with the uneven floor, about the March rain that caught her on the way to the Seine with no umbrella. Beckett listened without interrupting. He asked an occasional question. He was taking mental notes on everything. She could see him taking notes in his eyes. That was when his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, read it, and smiled with the corner of his mouth. "What?" she asked. "Theron." Beckett turned the screen so she could see. "He says if I blow this, he's resigning." Marlowe read it, let out a quick laugh. "Can he?" "He can do anything." Tuesday, 8 o'clock at night. It was raining in Chicago, a thin, persistent rain, the kind that soaks a coat before a person notices. Marlowe had just taken off her work shoes when the doorbell of the apartment rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. She crossed the apartment barefoot, looked through the peephole. Beckett. Black coat, hair slightly wet, a paper bag with the logo of Phuket Jasmine, the Thai restaurant on the corner in Wicker Park, her favorite. She opened the door, but didn't let him in. She stopped with her hand on the knob, him standing in the hallway of the floor with the bag raised slightly. "I'm not letting you in yet," she said. "I know. How did you find out that Phuket Jasmine is my favorite?" "Theron called Ren." "Ren called him back." "Ren called you." "She gave me a 15-minute audience yesterday at the studio. She actually timed it. In the first 3 minutes she said she was going to break my kneecaps if I made you cry again. In the 12 that followed, she assessed whether I was worth the Phuket Jasmine. At the end, she gave me the address and a list of rules I decided not to write down." Marlowe almost laughed. "What kind of rules?" "Rule number 1, you decide everything. Rule number 2, see rule number 1. Marlowe laughed, a short laugh. He heard it, and Beckett Calloway, standing in the hallway of a building in Pilsen with a bag of Thai food in his hand, realized he would spend the rest of his life trying to pull that laugh out of her again. "Sit down," she said, pointing to the hallway rug. "If you want to have dinner with me, we have dinner in the hallway. I'll take the rug." He sat down on the floor, leaned his back against the opposite wall, and opened the bag. Marlowe grabbed 2 plates from the kitchen, 2 cups, and came back to the hallway. She sat in her own apartment doorway so that the door stayed ajar behind her, a symbolic boundary, and she knew he understood. They ate on the floor. Pad Thai for her, green curry for him. The neighbor from 3B walked past on her way to the elevator, looked the two of them up and down, and disappeared into the elevator with the expression of a woman who had just been handed a story to tell for 3 weeks. Marlowe started laughing after the elevator door closed, a real laugh with her shoulders moving. Beckett laughed with her, a low, quiet laugh she had never heard in her life. "You laugh quietly," she said. "I didn't know I laughed." Saturday, 6 in the evening. The industrial kitchen of the Restaurant Vale was spacious, white, with immaculate stainless steel counters and a smell of melted butter and fresh herbs that permeated the air. Chef Laurent, a thin man in a starched apron with dramatic eyebrows, was waiting beside a prepped counter. Marlowe walked in behind Beckett. She took off her coat, hung it on the rack, and looked at the kitchen with her mouth slightly open. "Beckett," she began, "you told Theron 8 months ago in some conversation or other that your dream was to take a French cooking class and that you'd never had time." He gestured to the counter. "I rented the whole kitchen for tonight. Chef Laurent will teach us whatever we want. No other people, no rush. If you don't want to, we leave and nobody's offended." She looked at him. "You rented a kitchen because of a sentence I said to Theron 8 months ago. I'd rent one for a sentence you said 8 years ago." Marlowe turned her face toward the counter to hide her expression. Chef Laurent clapped once, enthused, and announced the menu: mushroom consommé to start, magret de canard for the main course, and a chocolate soufflé to close. He handed aprons to them both and started explaining the consommé. Marlowe and Beckett worked side by side. She sliced the mushrooms with precision. Beckett tried to copy her, cut them unevenly, and she laughed as she took the knife out of his hand to correct him. "You've never cut a mushroom in your life?" "I've had a cook for 15 years. "That's not an excuse." "I know." Half an hour later, he went behind her to grab a jar of salt, and his hand brushed her hip for a second. She stopped slicing. He stopped too. Neither of them turned. "Sorry," he said low. "You don't need to be." He moved away, went back to the sifting counter. A moment later, he spilled the entire jar over the stainless steel, by accident, clumsy, and sent up a white cloud that rose to her face. Marlowe laughed out loud. Beckett Calloway, CEO of the Calloway Group, covered my face in flour. I'm not the CEO here. Here I'm the intern. He grabbed a clean cloth, stepped close to her, and with his thumb, wiped the flour off her cheek. A slow, careful movement that lasted a second longer than it should have. His gaze held hers. The air in the kitchen shifted. Chef Laurent, who was on the other side of the counter prepping the duck, stopped cutting. Looked at the two of them. Looked at the knife. Looked at the two of them again. He cleared his throat. Mr. Calloway, the soufflé needs to go in the oven in 6 minutes. Shall we get going? Beckett didn't take his eyes off Marlowe. Of course. Marlowe answered a moment later, her voice hoarse. Of course. Chef Laurent nodded, grabbed his own pan, and moved to the farthest corner of the kitchen with a discretion remarkable for a man in a starched apron. They finished the dinner. They ate the duck at the kitchen counter without going to the formal dining room. They talked about everything that wasn't the bet. Childhood, cities, books. Her mother who lived in Des Plaines, his father who had died. At the end, Beckett insisted on doing the dishes. Chef Laurent was horrified and tried to stop him. Marlowe laughed so hard she had to lean against the counter. On the way back inside the car, she sat in silence, looking out the window. The lights of Chicago went by in golden streaks. Beckett drove without speaking, waiting. She leaned her forehead against the cold glass and thought, without saying it out loud, that maybe the man next to her wasn't the man of the laugh behind the door. Maybe it was another man. Maybe the man of the laugh behind the door had been a man who had never had a reason to be different, until now. The car stopped in front of Marlowe's building. Beckett turned off the engine. Neither of them moved. "Good night," he said. "Good night." She got out, climbed the stairs without looking back. Only on the second floor in the hallway did she allow herself to lean against the wall for a second and breathe deeply, and realize that the fear was gone. Somewhere between the cloud gate, the Thai food in the hallway, and the flour on her face, the fear had disappeared without her seeing it go. Something else was left, and she still didn't have a name for that other thing. Chapter 5. What No Man Had Ever Done Before. Last day of the notice period. At 7:30, Marlowe turned in her badge at the 57th floor reception, said goodbye to the new assistant, a young woman named Sloane, who had spent the last 2 weeks beside her learning everything, and rode the private elevator up to shut down her computer for the last time. Beckett was waiting in the anteroom, in a suit, no tie, hands in his pockets. "I know you're on your way out," he said. "I didn't come to talk you into staying. I just came to ask you for 15 minutes before you walk out of here." 15 minutes for what? "For me to show you something." She looked at him, looked at the clock, set the box of personal belongings down on the anteroom desk. 15 minutes. He took her to the service elevator. The elevator went 1 floor higher than usual, up to the top level, the helipad that had been decommissioned 6 years ago when the Calloway family traded the private helicopter for a partnership with an executive transport company. Since then, the rooftop belonged to the pre-dawn janitors and the pigeons. Beckett opened the steel door with a key Marlowe hadn't known he had. The October wind hit her face before anything else. Chicago stretched below in lines of light, the loop glowing, the lake a dark smear to the east, the lower skyscrapers blinking red aviation signals. "I didn't know this existed," Marlowe said. "It exists. It was the last place my father landed, a week before he died. No one has used it since." She looked at him. He didn't explain beyond that. He walked to the center of the helipad and stopped there, hands in his overcoat pockets. Marlowe followed at a respectful distance. "Why did you bring me up here?" she asked. "Because this is the only place in the tower where I'm not CEO of anything. Up here I'm just Beckett." The wind shook her hair. Beckett took off his overcoat in an automatic motion, without asking, without announcing, and draped it over her shoulders. The heavy fabric smelled of cedar and a discreet aftershave. She held the collar with her fingertips. "Thank you." He nodded. They stood in silence for a while, just the two of them, the lake, the sky of Chicago that was never truly dark anywhere. "My father died when I was 24, Beckett said, without looking at her. "Heart attack. He was at the office in the room where I sit today. I got there 40 minutes after the ambulance." Marlowe tightened the collar of the overcoat against her chest. "I took over the group the following Friday. No transition, no time to grieve. Nothing. The board looked at me like I was a 24-year-old kid because I was. I spent the next 5 years proving I wasn't. He breathed. That's when I learned to turn anything into strategy. Feeling, exhaustion, fear. All of it became a spreadsheet. All of it became a number. That's how I survived. And then? Then the spreadsheet became the person. He turned toward her. The light came in low and red from the helipad lamps. His eyes were more open than she was used to seeing, without the layer of control he wore in the tower. Theron was the only one who saw me, he went on. In 5 years, one single person knew I was still in there. I thought the rest of the world only saw the CEO because the rest of the world was shallow. And then this week, I understood that there was another person seeing me the whole time. I was the one who wasn't looking. Marlowe couldn't answer right away. Did you see? He asked. Every day. Why did you never say? Because I was hiding too. Beckett breathed slowly, nodded like a man receiving an answer that changes something inside him. He didn't move closer. He didn't reach out. He just looked at her for a while with the wind passing between them and said quietly, I'm sorry it took me so long. I'm sorry I hid so well. They didn't touch. They rode the elevator down in silence. At the door of the tower, Beckett called a car for her. Marlowe handed back the overcoat. Before getting into the car, she stopped for a second, looked at him. Good night, Beckett. He registered the name. He stood on the sidewalk as the car pulled away, and for a few seconds he didn't know what to do with his chest. It was the first time in many weeks that she had called him by his name, without irony, without Mr. in front of it, without professional distance as armor, and now she was no longer his employee. Now if she came back it was because she wanted to. It was also the first time in 10 years that Beckett Calloway felt something move inside his chest and didn't know how to convert it into a spreadsheet. Wednesday, 7:30 at night. Pearl Street Gallery, in the West Loop. A photography exhibit titled The Invisibles. Black and white portraits of anonymous women from 1950s Chicago. Secretaries, factory workers, switchboard operators, housewives. Marlowe had seen the poster the week before on the subway and had tucked the idea into a corner of her mind. She sent Beckett the address by text on Tuesday morning. If you're free Wednesday night. Beckett answered in 40 seconds. I'm free. She smiled at her phone without meaning to smile. At the gallery, they walked among the photos in silence. Beckett didn't comment. He just looked at the images with the attention of someone being taught something. A woman riding the subway alone with a paper bag in her lap. A switchboard operator answering 3 lines at once. A waitress wiping down a counter with a furrowed brow. Marlowe stopped in front of the photo of the woman on the subway. The woman was about 30, eyes downcast, hair pulled into a tight bun. She could have been her. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. That could be me, she said. Beckett stopped beside her, looked at the photo for a while, then looked at Marlowe. Not anymore. He reached out, pressed his palm to her cheek. This time without a professional excuse for the touch. This time direct. Marlowe closed her eyes. She felt his palm, warm, and his thumb tracing the edge of her cheekbone. He leaned in. His mouth came closer to hers, 2 centimeters, 1. She stepped back half a step. Not yet. Beckett stopped where he was, his hand still on her cheek. He nodded once, no pressure, no drama, and slowly pulled his hand away. Okay. They finished the exhibit. Beckett drove her home. He didn't come up. He didn't try anything at the door. He just said good night and waited for her to go inside before he left. Marlowe closed the door, leaned her back against it, and felt all at once her chest tighten in a way that wasn't longing. It was fear. She called Ren. Ren. Hey, girl. I almost kissed him tonight. And I shouldn't have almost kissed him. Ren went quiet on the other end of the line. Marlowe, if you want to stop, stop. No one's going to hold anything against you. I don't know if I want to stop. I just know that 2 weeks ago this same man laughed at me behind a door, and I don't know how my body has already forgotten that. Your body hasn't forgotten. You're just feeling something else on top of it. One thing doesn't cancel out the other. Marlowe took a deep breath. She didn't answer. Ren went on, her voice lower. Give yourself some time. No explanation, no drama. If he is what I'm starting to think he is, he'll wait. If he isn't, better to find out now. Okay. They hung up. Over the next 3 days, Marlowe didn't respond to any of Beckett's messages. He sent two, one Thursday morning, asking if she had slept well, and another Thursday night, saying he was thinking of her. Marlowe read both. She didn't answer either. On Friday morning, her phone buzzed again. Beckett, it's okay. I'll be here when you want to come back. If you don't want to, that's also going to be okay. Take care of yourself. Marlowe read the message 3 times. She didn't cry, but she felt her chest release a centimeter that had been locked for 3 days. She answered with a single line, "Jazz concert tonight at 9, if you still have the tickets." He answered in 30 seconds, "I do." Friday, 11 at night. The Auditorium Theatre on the way out of the hall. A jazz concert by a new pianist from New Orleans. Beckett had bought the tickets the same day she accepted his invitation. They walked out of the theatre with coats open, her hair loose, his hand light at her waist, a touch that wasn't gripping, just guiding. His car was parked at the corner. The driver opened the door. Marlowe stopped before getting in. "Beckett," he turned. "I want to go up with you tonight." Beckett stopped. The driver, discreet, closed the car door and moved to the driver's side. The air between the two of them on the sidewalk seemed to grow quieter. "Marlowe, I'm not telling you I've forgiven you for everything. I still have things I need to work through, and they're not going to go away today, but I'm telling you that tonight I want this. For me, for what I'm feeling right now." He looked at her for a while. His gaze wasn't hurried. There was no victory in his eyes, no internal celebration, just a silent question, repeated, checked twice. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." He opened the car door for her. Marlowe got in. The ride up to his penthouse, at the top of the Crestwood building in Streeterville, was made in silence. A new kind of silence, no bad weight, just tense with what was about to be. He didn't touch her in the car. He saved it for the elevator. In the private elevator, he didn't touch her either. He just looked at her in the reflection of the brushed steel, and she looked back, and they both knew. The penthouse took up 2 floors. Double-height ceiling, glass walls from floor to ceiling, all of Chicago open on the other side. He turned on a low, indirect light in the farthest corner. He didn't play music. He didn't offer a drink. He just closed the private elevator door behind her and stood 2 steps away. Marlowe looked at him. Beckett waited. Then she took the step that was left. She pressed her palm to his chest, through the fabric of the white shirt. She felt his heart beating too fast for a man who had always pretended to be calm. "Beckett, tell me. Don't talk. Kiss me." He kissed her slowly, as if he were asking permission from inside the kiss itself. His hand rose into her hair, fingers winding through the strands, his other hand sliding to her waist and stopping there. Still, firm, not pushing forward. His mouth tasted of whiskey and something else, a controlled urgency she could feel in the way he breathed when she answered the kiss. She moved closer. His body was solid, warm, heavier than she had imagined. Her back met the cold glass of the wall behind her. The contrast between the cold of the glass and the heat of him made her gasp softly. His hands came down her back and found the zipper of her dress. They stopped there, waited. "Yes," she whispered. The zipper went down slowly, tooth by tooth, and she felt his fingertips following the path down her spine. First the nape of her neck, then the middle of her back, then the curve before her waist. With every centimeter of skin that appeared, he paused half a second, just to let the warm air of the room touch her skin before he did. The dress loosened at the shoulders and slid down on its own to her waist. He held the fabric there, at her hip, waiting for her eyes. She nodded. The dress fell the rest of the way in silence, the heavy fabric making almost no sound when it met the floor. He didn't rush. He didn't carry her. He pulled back 2 centimeters just to look at her, his eyes moving over her body, as if they were recording every detail. Marlowe felt the cold glass against the backs of her shoulders, the contrast with the heat of his gaze, and her own breath rising faster than she knew how to control. And then, when he looked back at her face, something changed in his expression. He stopped. "Marlowe." "What?" I want to do this the way you want it. Tell me what you like. Marlowe froze. For a full second, her body stopped in place, because in all the years of her adult life, in every instance where someone had touched her, no one had ever asked that question. Reese hadn't asked. No man before him had asked. The question was so simple and so new that her brain took an extra moment to decode it. Beckett noticed. He didn't comment. He didn't explain. He just kissed her forehead, a long, still kiss, his lips resting in her hair, and said quietly, "We'll figure it out together." He took her to the bed. He walked with her in his arms in no hurry, as if carrying her were a part of the journey and not a bridge to what came next. He laid her down on the sheet, leaned over her and took off his own shirt with a slow motion. His chest was broad, defined without excess, his skin warm against hers when he came closer. Every touch was a question, his hand on her hip, a pause, a look, her nod, his mouth on her neck, a pause, her breathing changing, him continuing. He moved down her body slowly, discovering the places that made her arch her back, the places that made her breathe deeper, and returning to them. She closed her eyes, opened them again. She needed to see his face to believe it. When the moment came, Beckett looked at her, and instead of positioning himself over her, he lay down on his back and pulled her to sit on top of him. It was a deliberate gesture, a gesture he had thought about. She would set the pace. "Your way," he said, his voice rough. "Whatever way feels good to you." She breathed. She leaned over him. His body was firm beneath her, his heat rising through the skin of his abdomen, his chest, his neck. His hands found her waist and stayed there, 10 steady, warm fingers, marking the spot without forcing direction. Marlowe felt her own weight settle onto him slowly, first her knees, then her hips, then the center of her body. When she came down, the air left both of their chests at the same instant. His in a low groan she had never heard before, hers in a sigh that turned almost into a laugh halfway through, because it was absurd, it was new, it was so different from everything she knew that her body didn't yet know which reaction to choose. She stopped. He stopped. His eyes were on hers. "Marlowe, tell me. You're beautiful. You are absurdly beautiful. I should have seen it sooner. You are beautiful, Marlowe." He repeated her name as if the name alone were a complete sentence. She started to move, at her own rhythm, at her own time, slow at the start, then finding the cadence. Beckett followed. His hand slid up her back, took hold of the nape of her neck with a care that surprised her, and pulled her into a deep, still kiss right in the middle of the motion. Her skin against his, the weight of his body beneath hers, both of their breaths falling into the same rhythm without either of them searching for it. The pressure rose in layers. He murmured things in her ear, her name, again and again, and fragments of sentences she didn't finish processing. Beautiful. Mine. I still can't believe it. She started trembling first. The sensation rose up her back like hot water, from her hips up her spine to the top of her head, and halfway up, the world blurred out all at once. Marlowe closed her eyes. Her breath stopped. Her whole body tightened over him in a long spasm, and Beckett held her hips with both hands, firm anchoring, letting her get where she needed to get without rushing. She heard her own name come out of his mouth, muffled against her shoulder, heard his breath break in the middle. And only then did she understand that he had waited for her to finish first, on purpose the whole time, and that this was what he had been waiting for before he allowed himself. When she dropped onto his chest, exhausted, her heart beating against his in a rhythm that took a long time to settle, he was the one who came undone. His fingers tightened against her back with a strength that didn't hurt, just grabbed on, like a man afraid to let go. They stayed still, their breathing syncing up. The sheet crumpled. The low light in the corner of the penthouse painted their skin a warm tone, the color of amber. Marlowe started to cry, without a sound, just tears. Beckett felt the wetness on his chest before he realized what it was. He turned his face. He didn't ask. He just pulled her tighter against his body, pulled the sheet over her shoulders, ran his hand through her hair once, slowly. He waited. She cried for 3 minutes. Then she stopped, ran her hand over her face, breathed. "It's okay," he said low. "You don't need to explain right now. I know. I just needed you to know it wasn't bad. I know." He kissed her forehead. She closed her eyes, and she slept right there on top of him, without moving. Saturday, 9 in the morning. The light came in through the glass walls of the penthouse in golden sheets. Marlowe woke up first. His side of the bed was empty. She settled into the sheet, looked at the chair beside it. He had left a white shirt folded there, no note, no message, just the shirt. She put it on. It was big. It smelled like him. She went to the kitchen. Beckett was at the kitchen counter with his back to her, making coffee. Grey pajama pants, no shirt. His back had a small scar near his left shoulder blade. She had never asked about it, and realized she would ask one day, and that there was time to ask. He turned when he heard her bare feet on the floor. "Good morning." "Good morning." He poured her a cup. He pulled a chair out onto the terrace, behind the glass door. Chicago was waking up, the lake a pale blue, the traffic starting to build on Lakeshore Drive. They sat down. Marlowe held the cup with both hands. She breathed in the smell of the coffee, looked at Beckett. He was waiting, not for any specific thing, just waiting for whatever she wanted to say. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Go ahead." She looked at the cup. "I had a boyfriend in college. 3 years. His name was Reese Talbot." Beckett stopped halfway through lifting the coffee, set the cup down. "He liked me to be pretty. To take to his events, to show off to his friends. I was an accessory. He picked out my clothes. He told me what I was allowed to eat at dinners. He told me I talked too much and that it wasn't elegant to talk too much." Her voice was calm, but her hand on the cup tightened. "In bed, he never asked me what I liked. Never. In 3 years. He did what he wanted and it was over. I thought that's how it worked. I had no point of reference." Beckett stayed still. He didn't interrupt. "I ended it when I heard him tell a friend that I was pretty enough to take to events but boring to stay home with. He didn't know I was listening." She breathed. "I ended it the next day, and afterwards I decided I didn't want to be seen anymore. I pulled my hair back. I put on the glasses with no prescription. I bought the beige blouses. If no one looked at me, no one could use me again." She looked at him. Beckett's eyes were wet. She had never seen him with his eyes like that. "Last night," she went on, her voice lower, "was the first time in my adult life that a man asked me what I liked. You don't understand how big that is." Beckett set the cup down, stood up from his chair, knelt on the floor beside hers, took her hand between his. "Marlowe, look at me." She looked. "I'm going to ask you for the rest of my life, every day, what you want to eat, what you want to wear, where you want to go, what you like, what you don't like. I'm going to ask you if you want to talk. And when you want to talk, I'm never going to tell you that you talk too much, because I spent 2.5 years in silence next to you, and if I could go back in time, I would give anything to have listened to your voice sooner." She started to cry, this time not in silence. Beckett rose from his kneeling position, pulled her onto his lap right there in the terrace chair, and held her while she cried. Marlowe pressed her forehead to his neck. "I still haven't forgiven you for everything," she murmured. "I know. But I want to try." "Me too." She breathed against his neck. Chicago kept waking up down below. The coffee cooled on the table. Neither of them moved for a while. When she finally pulled back far enough to look at his face, Beckett wiped her cheek with his thumb, slowly, and said, "We start now, slowly. On your time." Marlowe nodded. "On my time." She picked up the warm cup of coffee, leaned her head on his shoulder. For the first time in her adult life, Marlowe Adair wasn't hiding anything from anyone, not from him, not from herself. And for the first time in many years, Beckett Calloway was silent next to a woman, and the silence wasn't absence, it was presence.
Hey, Rowan here. That's it for Book 1, but guess what? Book 2 is already done. You can grab access to it for just a small fee.
The morning was too calm, 2 cups of coffee in the kitchen, the kind of peace that fools you right before the fall. Then Marlowe opened her phone, a photo of her next to Beckett at the gala dinner, and the headline exploded on the screen. The secretary who set the whole thing up to seduce a billionaire, close sources reveal the scheme. The billionaire fell for it like a sucker. The air vanished from her lungs. Behind her, bare footsteps brushed the marble. Marlowe. She didn't turn, because she understood in that moment that they weren't trying to destroy only her image. They were trying to pry her away from Beckett, and no matter how tightly he held her in his arms, one lie from the right source was all it took to make her feel like that invisible woman again.
Like I said, that was just a taste of Book 2. To watch it uncensored, just click on the first link here in the pinned comment. I'll see you on the other side in a few seconds. Remember, just click on the first link down here in the comments, and Book 2 complete, no ads, no interruptions, will already be available for you. It's very simple. Book 2 is something I'm loving making. You're loving it too, so I promise there will be more. It's where you find increasingly spicy stories, a true dark romance. And precisely because this version is getting more and more heated, the video isn't well accepted publicly on YouTube. This closed environment is where I can actually share my essence and where I feel free to do my best work for you. More news coming soon. I'll be waiting for you on the other side. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people have been downloading our audio, effectively copying the entire story, and just re-uploading it to YouTube. If you want to watch the original story and be the first to get the next ones, search for My Stories by Rowan on YouTube for the best Billionaire and CEO Romance content. Remember, the official channel is My Stories by Rowan on YouTube and the My Stories platform. I'll be waiting for you there. Love, Rowan.